pagpatak ng ulan, sa pagsubok na dumaraan, may tapang kang harap, lilipad kang may pangarap. Lilipad kang may pangarap.
Kailan ay di mag-iisa, susulong ka ng may kasama, may tapang kang haharap.
Lilipad kang may pangarap. Lilipad kang may pangarap. Simula na ng bukas, simula na ng bukas, simula na ng bukas.
Sumpay sa pagbabago,
Harapin ang bagong mundo. Simula na ng bukas, simula na ng bukas ngayon.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Karen Valmonte, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar on tapping the global market through e-commerce and logistics. The e-commerce market has been growing even before the COVID-19 pandemic, but the health crisis has accelerated its growth. The World Economic Forum reported a 25% increase in e-commerce deliveries in 2020. Now, the organization expects a continued increase of around 10 to 20% of the recent rise in e-commerce deliveries even after the COVID-19 restrictions are lifted. Here in the Philippines, this growth in e-commerce opened new opportunities for businesses. However, this also created a new set of challenges. Today, we will be joined by experts to talk about meeting the evolving needs of consumers in a hyper-connected world. Our first speaker for today is Trade Department Undersecretary for Consumer Protection Group, Attorney Ruth Castello. Attorney Castello has held the post since 2018. Under her role, she looks into all areas of consumer protection in the country vis-a-vis how other countries are doing it. She heads monitoring and enforcement activities. She also gets the pulse of consumers firsthand. Yusa Castello worked on increasing the awareness of consumer rights and responsibilities and also strengthened the department's consumer protection initiatives. She formerly served as Undersecretary for the Construction Industry Authority of the Philippines and the Undersecretary of Competitiveness and Ease of Doing Business Group under DTI. Yusa Castello, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, hi, Casey, and hi, everyone. Morning. Thank you for the introduction, Casey. Like she said, I'm Ruth Castello, the Undersecretary for the Consumer Protection Group of the Department of Trade and Industry. But let me just tell you briefly about the Consumer Protection Group. We have under this function group in the DTI, among 6 function groups, the Bureau of Philippine Standards. This is the Philippine National Standards Body. It implements and promulgates standards for consumer products. We have around 11,000 in our list as we speak today. We also have the Consumer Policy and Advocacy Bureau. This is the bureau that that formulates policies for consumers, affecting all consumers for our welfare. We also do advocacy programs in the Consumer Policy and Advocacy Bureau for more information of everyone in the country. We also have the Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau, equally important bureau. This is the bureau in the DTI that implements all consumer laws, fair trade laws affecting all of us as consumers. So in the next slide, you will see here that in the Philippines currently we have a total of over 100,000 businesses that have registered for online or internet retail. These businesses, you will see the growth from 2019 to 2020, and then to 2021 as of August. The business names issued by the Department of Trade and Industry are valid for a period of 5 years. So the ones that were applied for in 2019 and were issued in 2019 will be effective, valid and effective until around 2024, and so on and so forth for 2020 and 2021. In the next slide, you will see, incidentally, I'd like to explain that business name registrations issued by the Department of Trade and Industry are not business permits. These are just the registration of the business names of single proprietorship businesses that operate in the Philippines. For corporations and partnerships, registration should be made with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Okay, so because we are the consumer protection group in the Department of Trade and Industry, we are the biggest consumer protection arm of the national government agency. We receive all kinds of complaints. We have a no wrong door policy that we implement in the DTI. So we receive all kinds of consumer complaints. You will see on the screen the complaints that we have received for offline transactions at 13,937 as of August 31, and consumers involving online transactions at 7,813 as of August 31, 2021. In the next slide, here you will see the nature of the complaints that we receive. The highest number of which is deceptive, unfair, or unconscionable sales act or practice. This would be the deceitful advertisement that are issued by by the businesses, including weight, including the size of the product that they send compared to the ones that are advertised. There is also a high number of complaints involving poor customer service. This is the after sales services that are provided by businesses, and poor customer service would basically entail no response or very slow response from business, or failure to address the consumer concern. And then, of course, the liability for product and service imperfection. These are the defects in the product that are delivered, or products or services that are delivered to the consumer. We also have the third highest number at 857 complaints as of August 31, 2021. In the next slide, you will see okay, these are some of the challenges of consumers in making their purchases. Of course, the health and safety risks. You will see especially now during the pandemic, we have limited operating hours of stores. So consumer needs are not met 100% by physical stores, and so they resort to online transactions. There's also a limited public utility vehicle available for transportation right now, and then you will see also on the slide the restrictions and the limited availability of products in physical stores. And this is one of the reasons that consumers resort to online transactions or online retail shopping. In the next slide, you will see some of the challenges on online stores or online shopping for the consumers. Of course, the quality issue, because consumers are not able to touch the product physically. They see it only on photos, and then the delivery and logistics is also an issue. Although the DTI is also doing its best to resolve the logistics issue in the country, not only for purchases that you get online, but also for other consumer goods that are delivered, going around for the benefit of all of us. And then the digital payment failures, additional charges. This is very important. It's called drip pricing. When you see that after the sale or after the fact, you will see that there are additional charges that were not explained to you by by the business, or that were not shown on screen by the by business, and then you will be surprised that there are your total balance would be a huge amount. And then, of course, the unclear return and guarantee policies. A lot of businesses right now, you would see, have no clear guidelines on return or exchange of the product, especially for online businesses. But it's very important that businesses are able to address this so that they can build consumer confidence. And then the totally, absolutely, or very little sales assistance, and the lack of security. Consumers are very prone to all kinds of scams, and this is happening around the world, not only in the Philippines. But we, in the Department of Trade and Industry, are doing our best to address this as well. In the next slide, wait, I will see. So, how can businesses use these tools at their disposal so that the businesses, can effectively reach consumers? As we know, the growing market of e-commerce, internet retail, shopping, internet businesses. In this slide, you will see some useful tips. Businesses should know their niche. Maybe specialize in some products, specialize in one kind of service, so that you can deliver 100% to your consumer or to your customer. You should be able to stick to your area of expertise, and then test the idea. Create an online store, a small physical store, maybe a small physical store or a small online store. You don't have to register initially while you're testing it, but once you are able to earn profit already from that business, then it's time to, when it becomes a habitual for you to do it as a business, then you will have to register. And then get social. May take advantage of all the social media pages that are available for free, and it's a very good way to do word of mouth reputation, and then because customers that are satisfied with your service will be able to share their experience with you and then promote you without you knowing it. And then understanding the power of online advertising. Please make sure that you make your audience very specific. If this applies to teenagers, maybe the millennials, or maybe senior citizens, or maybe persons with disability, you make your audience very specific on the product that you market. And very importantly, I think this is the last slide that I'm going to show. Very importantly, please comply with the law. It's very important that you build consumer confidence, and consumer confidence will not be there if they know that the business is not registered or does not comply with the laws. The initial step would be to create a business name or have your business name registered, like I showed you in the first slide earlier. It's an easy step in the Department of Trade and Industry. It takes only 8 minutes if you go to the BNRS website, the DTI website with the BNRS link. That's the business name registration system. Cost is also very little. The national registration would cost around 2,030 pesos. So an 8-minute transaction with the DTI will provide you high consumer confidence at the initial step. And then, of course, everything else will follow. You apply for a business permit from the local government unit. You apply for the BIR registration. Whether or not you are you are compelled or mandated to pay business taxes, it's very important that you have your business registered. Please take note that the train law implemented in 2018 exempts businesses or income taxes for income that is earned at 250,000 pesos. The first 250,000 peso income for a year will be exempt from income tax. So it's very good that you obtain or you develop a business reputation, and the word of mouth will be very effective. You once you earn this, people will start gravitating towards your business. So I think that is the last slide that I will show. Aside from the fact that the consumer protection is mandated by no less than the 1987 Constitution, so it is the Department of Trade and Industry's job to protect all of us consumers. We are 111 million people as of September 12, 2021. So it's up to the DTI to protect all of us. But we also encourage everyone to be wise in your shopping. Please think before you click. You have to, of course, do some vetting on the business that you are transacting with. So that is all for the Department of Trade and Industry. I hope you got something from what I said. Thank you very much.
Right. Think before you click. Thank you, Sec Castello, for giving us a picture of the department's initiatives and insights on what's on ground so far. Looking forward to learning more from you today. Joining our panel is Mr. Bennett Aquino. Mr. Aquino is an associate partner at Bain& Company and is also a member of the firm's communications, media, and entertainment practice. He has over a decade of consulting and executive level industry experience across the Philippines, Southeast Asia, the US, and Europe. Mr. Aquino's expertise spans corporate strategy, digital transformation, commercial excellence, performance improvement, operating model, and change management. He was previously the head of strategy of consumer business for Globe Telecom and has held banking and treasury roles for Standard Chartered Bank in the Philippines. Mr. Aquino holds an MBA from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania and a bachelor's degree in management engineering from Ateneo de Manila University. Good morning, Mr. Aquino.
Good morning. Let me just share my screen really quickly. There you go. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. By way of introduction, thank you, Casey. My name is Bennett Aquino, and I'm an associate partner at Bain & Company. For those who are not familiar, Bain is a global consulting firm that is present across 63 offices in 38 countries, with the Philippines office actually being office number 63 and office country number 38. In the next few minutes, let me talk you through some of our views on evolving customer needs, particularly in the Philippines, but also in Southeast Asia. For some context, in collaboration with Facebook, we at Bain & Company launched the Sync series, in which we have kept a close look at how Southeast Asia's consumer digital and e-commerce behavior has trended since 2018. We have run this study every year since, and in 2020, unsurprisingly, Southeast Asia's migration from the offline to the online economy broke all estimates. Changes that were expected to take place over half a decade took place in just 1 year, in large part because of the consumption habits brought about by the pandemic. So the clear question for us in 2021 was, which of these changes were transient and which ones will last? And how will consumer patterns change over time? I'll spend the next few minutes talking you through what we have found. So to start with, Southeast Asia's digital economy has actually continued to expand by almost every metric. Even after the accelerated growth seen in 2020, the region has more digital customers and they are purchasing more and more categories online. By the end of 2021, within Southeast Asia, there will be 350 million digital customers. And in the Philippines, in that middle bar that you see there, specifically, we will have 61 million digital customers by the end of this year, up from 58 million in 2020. This represents 78% of the population older than 15, and the total number of 61 million is second only to Indonesia and the region. As a percentage of total, 78%. This is in line with Singapore, a country with a much smaller population and historically has been far ahead of us in terms of digital maturity. Not on this slide, but also important to note that the average spending per digital customer is also expected to grow by 60% by the end of this year compared to last year. And by 2026, this will nearly double 2020 levels. So not only are we getting more digital customers on board, they are spending they're spending quite a bit more as well in these digital platforms. So the future challenge actually for businesses will move from how do I acquire new digital customers to how do I gain share of their wallet as their spending online increases? And that's where we're trying to pull our heads together and answer some questions. So the first question is, what is really the best way to capture this share of wallet? The next question to that is what does the purchase journey look like today? And what we've seen, particularly over the past 12 months, is that there really has been a paradigm shift in the way Filipinos shop. Overall, if you see the purchase journey on the slide, online channels have become more prevalent at each step of the purchase journey and in a more pronounced manner for discovery and evaluation. In our study, at least 80% of respondents cited online as their main discovery and research channels before buying. And while on the purchase part of the journey, offline still remains to be an important channel, we have actually seen this overtake online at 52% versus 48% of offline, particularly driven by e-commerce and social channels, which have become the dominant point of sale points for the Philippine market. And one of the notable things that we have found is that we're seeing Filipinos actually shop or shop hop across significantly more sites than last year. In 2021, compared to 2020, Filipino online shoppers visited 80% more platforms versus last year. On average, Filipinos went from shopping at 4.3 platforms to nearly double that to 7.8, or about 8 in 2021. This is the fastest growth in the region, and it's an indication of both the increase in core demand for online shopping and e-commerce, but it's also an indication of the uptick in the quantity and the quality of supply, basically the quality and the quantity of the online platforms. And in which categories did we see this acceleration? The answer is pretty much all of them. If you see this slide, by the end of 2021, the online penetration from nearly every category is actually seen to at least double by the end of this year, even faster than what we observed last year. Online groceries specifically continue to show the most dramatic growth for the second year in a row and are expected to grow 4x in the Philippines. Of course, over a small base, but if you look at the proportion that groceries occupy as far as total retail spend, it's a massive, massive number. So this is a sign again that the growth is not on one particular category, but across the board pretty much. Another important thing, and another interesting thing actually that we saw this year, was that for the very first time, Filipinos are now starting to be willing to walk the talk when it comes to sustainability. In the survey that we ran, 9 out of 10 consumers are actually willing to pay more for ESG-focused companies and products. ESG meaning environment, social, and governance. 8 out of 10 of them are actually willing up to 10% more premium, and some would attribute these actually to the heightened sense of social responsibility or just the general bayanihan sense that has been reinvigorated during this pandemic. We expect this trend to continue for years to come, and this is something that businesses and brands should keep in mind as they move forward with their strategies. And on this next slide, I also just want to highlight the other part of the picture. I know Yusek just talked about how businesses need to keep responsible, but I wanted to highlight as well that while it's obvious that demand has been a clear driver for the growth of this online commerce and online economy, the fact that it's growing at this hyper speed has to be in large part due to much less friction when it comes to supply. So I wanted to highlight some of the things that we're seeing as well that have enabled this consumer demand to reach more fruition over the past year. Really quickly, three factors have contributed to this. First, the promotion and the prevalence of e-wallets and e-wallet campaigns, including the government's own encouragement of this adoption. The second is the expansion of logistics, both in the form of startups, which are getting more funding, but as well as logistics centers, which are becoming more efficient. And lastly, the growing commitment of more and more platforms towards consumer trust and quality assurance. While there is much more to be done here and much more growth to be had, over the past 12 months, we've actually seen quite a bit of a step change in consumer trust towards more platforms, as we saw with consumers jumping from four online platforms to about 8. So kudos to online platforms and online e-commerce sites for doing their part in their growth as well. Now, if we take basically the Filipino digital consumer in a snapshot, this really could be a good summary of what we found. On the growth of the consumers, there will be 61 million digital Filipino consumers by the end of this year. 8 out of 10 Filipino adults basically will be digital. On what they buy, they purchase 70% more categories online versus last year, and they've increased their spend by 1.6 times since last year as well, which is a massive growth. How they shop, 23% of them discover new products through social and video. They shop at 80% more online shops, and 90% of them are willing to pay more for ESG. And lastly, I didn't go through this, but how they spend their time, we actually expect 70% of their time to remain spent on in-home activities, and 80% of dining to remain at home. So to round this out, after all of these trends, obviously we had to go through them in a very compressed manner. What does this mean for businesses? And given what we've seen, what do we believe are the imperatives for businesses or brands? In our view, there are 6 imperatives. The first is businesses must rewrite a multi-year and a digital-first strategy. There are many things needed for the immediate term, but digital is also the long game. Brands need to develop a holistic digital strategy and invest ahead of the curve when it comes to required enablers such as data analytics, digital marketing, account management, and supply chain. The second is there really needs to be a reimagining of consumer engagement, because consumer behavior in the purchase journey, as I mentioned, is constantly evolving. It's very imperative for brands to reorient their marketing and route to market to match this, to be where consumers are in that purchase journey. Third has to do with their product offerings and the need to refresh these over time. Consumers will increasingly be demanding products that are right for me, that are right now, while at the same time expecting low costs. And brands will need to manage this balance while keeping their range simple, easy to understand, and affordable, which is not an easy task. Moving on to the next factor, we think businesses should rethink sustainability as a revenue driver. It's being more and more prominent, and given the heightened premium that consumers have on ESG, brands must actually ensure that they have adequate ESG-focused options on their product range. Now, of course, there will be concerns about cost efficiencies, but it is actually possible to transform the supply chain to improve sustainability without needing to compromise on cost efficiencies. The fifth imperative is the need to realign to the new normal on a more permanent basis. Product offerings, marketing, and delivery options should really cater to this new wave of relatively constant home bodies. It is important to redesign and customize some offerings, especially for at-home consumption. And finally, businesses should just rewire their business model to be more agile. Disruptions to business models are happening 360 degrees across all industries. This will not change. Instead of waiting for a moment of a pause or stability to make plans, businesses must look at how they can adapt now, and how they can plan for future disruptions via partnerships, via agility, and via other solutions. And these, in a nutshell, are how we believe businesses should really shape themselves towards what we believe to be the future evolution of consumer demand. Thank you so much, and let me hand over back to Casey for the next speaker.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Aquino. These are very interesting insights, especially on how payment, consumer trust, and logistics are put forward now that everything's online. Uh, on a related note, for our last speaker, we have Ms. Ana Melissa Nava. Ms. Nava is the Chief Executive Officer and co founder of One Export, a one stop end to end platform allowing MSMEs to access the world of exporting. Before starting the company, Ms. Nava spent her career in the exporting industry. She was with Mondelez in Philippines, handling the US and European markets. She was then the business development consultant at YCP Solarians, where she was pivotal in developing the exportation of fiber cement from Vietnam to the Philippines. Ms. Nava is a graduate of De La Salle University and the Asian Institute of Management. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Nava.
Thank you, Casey. So, hi everyone. Again, I'm Mel from One Export, and maybe very briefly before I present my insights on the topic, let me share what One Export is. One Export is a one-stop end-to-end solution for cross-border trade. We are a platform for small and medium businesses that want to export because we focus on three things: compliance, sales, and logistics. So let me go through a few of my insights in terms of the changing needs of small and medium enterprises for the hyper connected world, right? So as mentioned already by Sir Bennett, e-commerce is growing significantly over the last 10 years. In less than 10 years, it has grown by at least three times, right? And before, when e-commerce just accounted for about less than 10% of total retail, now it accounts for about 21 to 24% of total retail, and it's expected to grow over the years. But I guess one insight I would like to double down on is cross-border trade. So one insight in terms of exporting or e-commerce is that in the US, about almost 50% of shoppers purchase products from outside of the United States. And what does this mean, right? This means that exporting has become more accessible, right? However, it has not been accessible for Southeast Asia and the Philippines because of so many barriers, right? But this means that consumers are shifting. People want products that are cheaper, that are of good quality, and they don't necessarily have to be purchased in that country. So this trend has been significantly seen through shipping, right? And parcel delivery has been growing significantly over the course of 5 years, where it's seen a CAGR, or cumulative annual growth rate of 15%, right? Also, a study by Shopify have seen that if you do not offer international shipping, you're likely to have lesser sales, right? And we've seen this trend grow because people who are ordering online are not just ordering from the country of origin, but they're ordering from all over the world. However, growth in e-commerce and growth in shipping is not without any problems. A lot of the supply chain constraints we have seen over the past few years, especially during the pandemic, was the fact that there are so many delays and so many product shortages and rising shipping costs, right? And a recent article by the Business World has even noted that shipping shortages are hampering a lot of deliveries for imports and exports. But what are the common themes or trends that have emerged from all of this, right? I'd like to discuss three trends that have emerged. One of them is drop shipping. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, but for those of you who aren't, it's really just a fulfillment method where the seller does not keep the stock. It's the manufacturer, say from the Philippines, that delivers the products from the Philippines to wherever the buyer is, but they do not have a relationship. It's the relationship of the drop shipper with a buyer abroad. It's seen to have grown significantly over time. It is $102 billion market. And one of the drivers is really like AliExpress. A second trend that has emerged because of the shipping problems are balikbayan boxes. So we know that balikbayan boxes are significantly dated, right? They've been there for the longest of time. However, balikbayan boxes during the pandemic has seen a new shift, right? Where people have this pabili, or like you can buy the products and somebody will pack it for you, or somebody will take it from you. So we've seen the trend of buy and ship models from, say, the US and going to the Philippines, or US and China going to the Philippines. But we've also seen a trend from the Philippines going to different parts of the world and putting them in balikbayan boxes where they're considered as personal effects, and they're cleared immediately through customs. This has been a trend that is significantly increasing and is disrupting the exporting industry also, because they don't go through traditional means. And lastly, we've seen a rise of community-based markets. Of course, you've seen the rise of Amazon, in the stock of Amazon and Walmart growing significantly because of the pandemic. But one of the things that have emerged because of the disruption in the supply chain is community-based markets. This is really because when Walmart or Amazon cannot deliver, right, they look to the nearest community based market where they can get their goods as soon as possible, and they know that the goods are credible. But let me zero in the very core of the businesses here in the Philippines, right? It's micro, small, and medium enterprises that contribute about 99% of total businesses in the Philippines, and why we want them to export, right? Why do we want them to do cross-border trade? They were significantly affected during the pandemic. A lot of them, of course, retail, traditional retail, has significantly decreased, and a lot of these businesses are looking for markets abroad. And if you look at the barriers that micro, small, and medium enterprises face, right? When you talk about exporting, or when you talk about doing cross-border trade or going global, a lot of them are faced with the fact that they have a lot of similar products. If you talk about the Philippines, maybe a very one or two competition, but you have more competition when you try and compete with other markets, or other manufacturers in different markets, right? Second, of course, would be the accessibility to different sales channels, right? You're not just talking about selling to eBay or Amazon, you're also talking about selling to the mainstream market, or even to the Asian market. And how do you get them to get to that point? Right. Of course, products in the Philippines are not exactly considered cheap. They're considered of higher price. And not exactly of high quality because of the concerns with raw materials, right? And it's also, again, let's going back to the problems in shipping. It's very difficult to transport. And again, there are a lot of delays. But there are so much opportunities that small and medium enterprises are missing, and one of them is omni-channel shopping for cross-border trade, right? So you're not just talking about is going or shipping to Amazon, or or shipping digital. You're also talking about, we've seen the trend in terms of Amazon creating stores in different markets, right? So that if you want to have returns, or if you want to buy it or see the product physically, you can do that. Of course, COVID-19, even if it is a detriment, it's also an opportunity, right? Where a lot of countries who are currently recovering are looking at importing non-essential products, where the countries who are still in the COVID-19 pandemic are looking to import essential products. And these things are things that micro, small, and medium enterprises can take advantage of. And lastly, as mentioned, sustainability is one of the things that consumers are really looking forward to, right? They're looking to buy products that are authentic from home, or looking to buy products that are homegrown brands, or authentically local, right? That are not necessarily that are not necessarily available because of the supply chain problem. So, to just say and maybe end this, right? How do we meet the evolving needs of consumers in a hyper connected world? I mean, I would go to really doubling down on cross-border trade and getting started with cross-border trade. And it's really it's not exactly an easy process. There is so many things that you have to do, but if you we double it down, just put it down to three. You need to get the proper compliances that you need for in terms of documentation, labeling, and other necessary documents, and of course selling, and lastly fulfilling, right, processing the orders, getting the orders abroad, and bringing the orders to the channels that are necessary. And I guess I'll end there, and yeah, move forward with the next speaker, and the yes.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Nava. So we have a lot to unpack today. Let's begin with the question and answer with our panelists. So to start off, we already know that there is an increase in e-commerce sales. And as Mr. Aquino said earlier, we are expected to grow the e-commerce market to 61 million by the end of this year. Now, what is a surprising consumer habit that emerged amid the pandemic? If I may just ask, can maybe Mr. Aquino lead?
Sure, I can kick this off. And thank you for the question. It's a very ripe one because 2020 in particular was a year of a lot of surprises and unexpected trends, I would say, right? But I would qualify this to say that I wouldn't necessarily say that this is like a complete surprise, but a surprise when it comes to the magnitude in which it happened. One of the key barriers when it comes to Filipino online adoption really is the aspect of trust and openness to trial of digital platforms. The big surprise over last year, but also from this year, is the rate of acceleration when it comes to the number of online shops and online platforms that Filipinos started to trial with, right? And what this indicates, like to recap, the Filipinos jumped from shopping at 4 online platforms last year, which is already a pretty decent number, to 8 this year. And what this indicates is that barrier of trust, while significant, the minute that people need to cross that, they actually start trialing out a whole lot of number of a number of different platforms as well, and it usually is just an acceleration from there. So that's the first one. The second one is something actually that I also was pleasantly surprised to see for the Philippines, which is the fact that, like I mentioned, they are taking ESG and sustainability a little bit more seriously than they have in the past, right? The fact that Filipinos, 9 out of 10 Filipinos consider paying more for ESG, and the fact that actually a good number of Filipino users, 12% of Filipino consumers, actually cited ESG as the number one reason why they switched brands or switched platforms over the past year. This is just an indication that sustainability, social impact, the environment is starting to become front and center to Filipinos psyche. And if you look back in 2019 on when this was expected to happen, it probably wasn't going to be a 2-year journey. It probably was something closer to a 5-7 year journey. But now we're seeing it as of today. So those are things that were surprising in terms of the pace, not necessarily the trend itself.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Nava, since you also mentioned earlier that more MSMEs have actually noticed an uptick in sales, especially as consumers would want to consider ESG and sustainability. Would you have anything to add in terms of any other surprising consumer habits because of this?
I guess if there's one major consumer habit that I found very interesting, was that there was a rise in a lot of low risk, high reward consumers. So a lot of them say they want their products immediately, right? They want their products. They're very demanding in terms of time and ordering. They also want and we've seen this in the Philippines. We've seen people wanting to to credit, right? So instead of paying the products up front, they want to be able to pay it over a course of 12 months or 36 months, right? And I think we are moving towards a time where the consumer is king. The consumer will get whatever it is that they want, and it will be extremely competitive from here on. It as we know, for we run an e-commerce marketplace where we know the costs of shipping are more expensive, but retailers or wholesalers are not able to increase those prices because again the consumer is king, and the consumer gets what they want, and they won't necessarily get products at a high price, right? So those are things that I think we're seeing more and more today. And I guess the question is, how will people how will the supply chain adjust, right? How will we make this more sustainable to be able to meet all of the needs of the consumers?
Um, for Yusa Castello, you mentioned earlier that one of the online, one of the problems of consumers online is they have problems in determining the product quality, and the logistics issue in the country just adds up to that because the timeline for now the consumer journey has been stretched. May I know if there are anything surprising that came up during the pandemic, especially since we expect that these habits will continue further on?
Yeah, you would notice now, well, because of the rise of the use of the internet, around 70% of the country's population already have resorted to internet use. You would notice also that, well, it's kind of not exactly surprising, but it's welcome news actually that Filipino consumers have now resorted to online shopping, including their basic needs. Medicine, supermarket, grocery shopping is done online. Even buying plants is now done online. So it's a surprise and it's a welcome news for the e-commerce industry in the Philippines, because there are more and more consumers that have resorted to online internet shopping. But yes, I agree that this habit will continue for many years to come. This is already our new normal, and we need to accept it. And because it is the e-commerce industry that is the primary industry that is involved in this business, we encourage them to improve services delivered to the consumer and to build a high trust or a high confidence from the consumer. You would imagine now that even medical supplies are purchased online. So everything that the consumer needs can be found in the internet and can be bought online, can be purchased online. But consumers and business should just both be aware that, of course, there are risks that they get into, but businesses are really encouraged to deliver the correct product, the correct service that is purchased by the consumer.
All right. Thank you for that, ma'am. For Mr. Aquino, how do we establish trust with consumers when adopting the digital first strategy, and especially when it comes to consumer engagement? So, how should businesses or brands model the digital buying experience for consumers? And what else should they keep in mind when mapping this consumer journey to establish this trust?
Yeah, and that's that's actually quite the million dollar question for brands, right? How do they remodel this, reimagine their consumer engagement given the evolving purchase journey that consumers are seeing? And really, what we do believe, as I mentioned, it's imperative for brands to just really mirror consumers' multi-channel and multi-platform path to purchase, right? They don't want brands do not fall into the one fall into the pitfall of flying blind, and not being driven by return on your investments. You can't be spending the same amount of resources on the traditional journey. And examples of how this consumer journey can be driven more seamless is by having really bespoke experiences from discovery to sale to delivery, right? It's creating a unique, consistent experience across the offline channels and social channels. Some examples, if you think about the four-stage process of the journey, which is see, find, buy, and repeat. For example, if you talk about seeing, where how are consumers driven to your site, the key priority here is that how do brands drive maximum traffic through an understanding of the shopper, so understanding of off-platform digital marketing. When it comes to finding, which is how easily can consumers navigate your platform and find your products, there is the initiative to optimize the right details of the product versus your alternative competitor SKUs, right, through search and shopper marketing. When it comes to the buying process, does the information or pricing or assortment of your site, of your brand, convince your consumers to buy your products? The initiatives here would be to boost your purchases through the right assortment online, tailored price, dynamic pricing, and the right promotion strategy. And finally, but equally important is actually the repeat process, which is how is the consumer convinced to return shop for your product? And really, this lies on data, right? Data-driven decision making, test and learn, adaptation, scale and use of CRM marketing, these types of events. In short, across the seeing, the consideration, the purchase, and the repeat journey, there needs to be a clear ROI driven initiative or campaign that brands push with the evolving consumer needs.
All right. Thank you for that, Mr. Aquino. For Miss Nava and for you, Sir Costello, we have a question here from the audience. What are red flags consumers must note when ordering from an e-commerce site outside the country? Maybe we
Well,
can start with Miss Nava. Sorry.
sure. So of course, like when you go to an e-commerce site, you have the reviews, the delivery, and of course the return policy, right? I think those three things are very important, right, in order for you to really make a good decision about buying from another country. But I think on your own, you also have to make your own due diligence in terms of what products are allowed in the country, because yes, they could ship to the country, like they could ship back to the Philippines, but if the products are not allowed and it will get held in customs, right, you as a consumer will be very dissatisfied because you have not received your products, right? And so I think there are things that you may want, but they're not necessarily allowed, which I think the government, I think, has clearly identified the customs, in customs, right? And so hopefully you don't order those things for you to not for you to be a very satisfied customer.
We can't hear you, Casey.
For you, Sir Costello.
Yeah, thank you. Of course, the consumer will have to, or the buyer, or the customer for that matter, will have to do the vetting because, of course, it's a consumer. It's a consumer. You have all the eight consumer rights, but it's also a consumer obligation or a consumer responsibility to be wise and to be curious, or to be maybe to be meticulous. We need to be able to vet the seller, especially if the seller is abroad. The internet has a vast expanse of information, so you can find it there, especially the reputation or the like. What's her name? She mentioned earlier that we also need to read the feedback because this is the reputation that is built by the business. And then the terms and conditions of the agreement. We always say to think before you click. Read everything that is there, especially the terms and conditions. Also, the payment gateway. There is, of course, a huge expanse of information that you will find in the internet on the payment gateways by these platforms or sellers, and there are credible payment gateways that you will find internationally. In the ASEAN, as a bit of good news, in the ASEAN, all the 10 countries are currently mandated to provide an online dispute resolution system by each country. And then once the countries are able to do this, we will go on board for the entire ASEAN. And then this is going to be a cross border dispute resolution system so that we can resolve any issue with any seller that you will find maybe in Singapore or in Malaysia or in Vietnam. We are also currently working with the Federal Trade Commission. We are getting a lot of information from them and we receive help. So for cross-border transactions, of course, consumers will have to be very careful, but there is always a redress. They can always come to DTI and we will try or we will do our best to resolve whatever issues they have.
We have another question from the audience. So, what is the possible reason why Filipinos are willing to pay extra for ESG compliant brands? I will be combining this with my next question on how do you know or how do you spot the next trend and what role does social media play in this? Maybe I can ask first Mr. Aquino's opinions on this.
Sure, and this is something actually that that as I mentioned was one of the more interesting trends that we saw here. To be clear to put this into context, uh, the trend of more awareness and the trend of more affinity towards ESG and sustainability. This this wasn't unpredicted, and this wasn't unique to the Philippines, right? This trend was being seen even pre-pandemic, and the reason for this is really that across the board, because of consumer sentiment, but also because of the way that the corporate structures across different markets have been evolving. This has become a top of mind priority for many business and consumers alike, right? The question, I suppose, is asking why was this accelerated over the past couple of years by the pandemic, and the answer here, I would say, will likely lie with the nature of consumer sentiment and consumer experiences, particularly in the Philippines, right? As many of you would know, and as many of you would have personal experiences with, either with yourselves or relatives, the Philippines has been hit a lot harder by the pandemic than other markets. This has led to just a keen awareness, of the importance of the right social infrastructure, the right environmental infrastructure, that it is really needed, right? So people have people's awareness has been raised to the needs of society, not only environment, but as far as social responsibility and also governance responsibility. This has been front and center people's minds. Secondly, people in the Philippines have had a lot more time and space, because of the lockdowns, to really digest and reflect upon this, right? So if I were to kind of summarize this, it's really just a more widely open awareness to the challenges of society, of the environment, of governance across the Philippines, given the situation of the pandemic. But that said, this was going to happen at some point anyway, and it is also happening similarly to other markets, not just the Philippines. So Southeast Asia wise, we're seeing a similar trend, not as stark as the Philippines. Some are, but not as stark, but a lot, like 70-80% of consumers around Southeast Asia, for example, are also seeing ESG as a key decision driver when it comes to their purchase decisions. So that's my quick take on why this is really growing, particularly over the last couple of years. Next on the next trend, I'll quickly give my sense, and then I'll hand over to the rest, because I think this is also an open question for my colleagues here. And particularly, what role does social media play? Actually, the funny thing is, we actually believe that social commerce is one of the new trends that is worth looking into, right? There are many questions here on how do you get consumers to start overcoming this trust barrier? How do we get consumers to really trial e-commerce? And one of the key answers that we're seeing here is obviously there is that base layer of e-commerce sites getting more traction, but a good proportion actually of online commerce today is happening by what we call social commerce, your Facebooks, your Instagrams, etc., where a lot of the purchasing is happening there. That we believe is one of the trends is keen to we're keen to watch in the Philippines, because it is managing both the social aspect of Filipinos. We spend a lot of time on social media connecting with friends, especially during the pandemic, but it's also blurring that line between what am I doing within my community and what am I buying. And this social commerce space sits in the middle, and we see this actually as a key gateway towards more uh, more permanent digital adoption and e-commerce adoption down the road. So that's my first take. And let me hand over to my colleagues if they have any thoughts on the question.
Ms. Nava?
Well, okay, just to add on with what Sir Bennett has said, really, I mean, more and more today, I mean, aside from the fact that we had COVID-19 and people looking at, better products, better produced products, right? We've also seen a global trend and shift in terms of more relevant and pressing issues. Like in the States, you have, say, your Black Lives Matter or your anti-Asian hate, right? And people looking for more representation wherever they go, right? Say we run an e-commerce company where we bring products from the Philippines to the rest of the world, and we've seen a trend where people are willing to pay more if they know that the products are authentically made and done by certain people from the Philippines, from a certain group in the Philippines, right? And if they know that it really came directly from the Philippines and to their doorstep, right? And so these trends we're seeing really because people are looking for more authentic experiences, more real, real products, right, to be able to put in their shelves, right? And they're really willing to try these things in order and pay a premium in order to have those experiences, right? And yeah, I guess to just add on in terms of like how the social media play in terms of developing the next trends, right? A few trends I've mentioned a while ago were like, for example, community-based markets, right? Community-based markets have grown in the States, particularly because of social media. TikTok, right? TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, where people post, right? And people go to these areas in order to buy the products that they need, have really helped during the pandemic, right? We've also seen a rise in terms of like what are the trends. We found that some of our buyers, before they order from us, they check social media first in terms of what are the trends in the Philippines, what are their loved ones buying, right? And they use these insights in order to import products, right, or to get products or to get hold of these products, right? So these things we look at very seriously. We look at it in a more granular sense because we're not just talking about what they're purchasing, but we're also talking about behavior, or how do we get the products to them at the most affordable prices, right? And how do we try and disrupt the current problems of supply chain in order for people to be connected, in not just in terms of buying or selling, but also in terms of getting quality products at the right time. So I guess for us, that's really the problem that we want to be able to solve, and hopefully, again, help in terms of connecting the consumers.
Thank you, Ms. Nava. Now, all things considered, Undersecretary, as e-commerce and doing business online will likely continue to grow even after the pandemic, what are your reminders for consumers and businesses alike?
I just like to touch a little bit on why consumers are now shifting to sustainable products. It's a good thing because it's a really good thing. The Department of Trade and Industry advocates for this. Well, aside from the Go Local, Buy Local, Go Local program that we also have the advocacy on sustainable consumption and production so that we can preserve the blessings of the environment. All these products come from the environment naturally, and we of course need to be able to protect our source. So in relation to the pandemic, we would also note that the pandemic could not have happened around the world if our environment is healthy, if the planet is healthy. So that's another thing altogether, but just a reminder for consumers to be proactive. Number one, they need to be wise buyers. They need to protect the money, their hard-earned money, to pay for the products or services that they find in the internet. E-commerce is the new normal. This is going to last for many many years after this pandemic, and we need to know what we should do. We need to be wary of sellers that a lot of scams have been happening around the world, not just in the Philippines. So consumers need to be more careful in their transactions. For buyers, I have repeatedly said that for businesses, they need to build trust and confidence. They need to get the confidence of the consumer so that the businesses will grow. And the first step to do this, to build confidence of the consumer, is to formalize their businesses. We do not want a forever underground business, or a forever unregistered business, or a forever hiding under the skirts of the law. So if we are a formal business, if we are a legitimate businesses, uh, um, consumers will see this, and this will be the best way that we can build confidence. Of course, aside from the fact that businesses should deliver what is exactly purchased from them, whether it's goods or services, whatever the buyer's purchase, delivery by business should be exactly what it is.
Thank you, Yusek. Now, we don't have much time, so we will ask for the final closing statements of our panelists, beginning with Mr. Aquino.
Sure. And I'll keep this brief. And for this, if you don't mind, I'll also share my screen. Great. So just a couple of takeaways from what we have seen. Again, if you're interested in seeing more of the Bain report, we have published this in collaboration with Facebook. It's as part of the Sync program. So please do look that up, and there will be more of what I'm talking about in that publication. But a couple of key takeaways for us. None of these should be surprising, but some things to keep in mind based on what we're seeing. So this is relevant for both consumers and businesses alike. Southeast Asia, in particular the Philippines, has really been in the forefront of digital transformation in Asia Pacific. We are accelerating at the fastest rate compared to the region. But more importantly, second, the pandemic has led to a paradigm shift in the way consumers purchase goods. The purchase journey has evolved, and the way consumers discover, evaluate, and purchase has really shown shifts beyond just what I've talked about today. There have been more nuances underneath that, and it's important for consumers to actually know what options there are, but also for businesses to understand where consumers are going. Third, when it comes to the battle of loyalty, it's no longer just about price, especially in this day and age. Product quality, product experience, convenience will win customers, not just affordability and the lowest price available. As has been harped on a couple of times today, sustainability factors now are compelling consumers to make their brand decisions. Some of them switch brands for sustainability reasons, and that's a good thing. And they are willing to pay more for these, right? So both in terms of encouraging consumers to think more about sustainability, but also for businesses to start thinking about their role to play, an important factor to keep in mind. Um, Fifth, remember that there will not really be an end to what we consider to be new normal right now. Some of the changes that we've seen in COVID are permanent. home-centric lifestyles will persist beyond the pandemic. So both consumers and businesses need to be ready for what this means in how consumers consume their goods and services. And finally, something that we just also need to keep in mind: supply and the nature of platforms and retailers and brands. This will continue to get better. Investors, private equity investors, international investors will continue to invest in the country and hence fuel a lot more digital disruptions, whether it comes to e-commerce platforms, payment gateways, other digital services such as health and education. The Philippines, along with Southeast Asia, is ripe for disruption, and we should expect a lot more digital services and products to be available over the next few years, which is a good thing. And that would be the six takeaways that I would have from what we have seen over the past year. Thank you very much to everyone.
Ms. Nava, for your closing statement. Ms. Nava.
Oh, hi. Yeah, sorry. Well, for me, really, just to summarize, I think, of course, e-commerce is here to stay. It's going to be our life for the next 50 years. But I think it's equally important to just make sure that, how do we evolve as e-commerce evolves, right? And how do we evolve as the customer becomes king? Right. And I feel like, over time, supply chain will have to be able to adjust to all of the consumer needs. And of course, the consumer needs evolve as time evolves, as time and as people's needs evolve. And so I guess, as businesses, right, we need to be able to serve those needs. We need to be able to make sure that all of those problems are addressed, and we need to be able to make sure that, we apply, a again, as mentioned by Sir Bennett, a digital first strategy, right, where we're able to really reach all of our consumers.
Thank you, Ms. Nava. And for Isaac Stelo.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Casey. I like what Miss Nava said, that consumer is king, and that we're working towards making the consumer king. But to the Department of Trade and Industry, consumer is really king. It is our protection. The what we're doing is for our protection, and we encourage all businesses to always keep in mind that consumer is king, because the patronage that they will get or not get will depend on the kind of service that they deliver to the consumer. And protection is always there. I mentioned earlier that the government is there, and we are mandated by no less than the 1987 Constitution. But businesses should also have to be aware that, like I mentioned, they should be always able to deliver what is ordered or what is purchased from them, and to make sure that they have the after service sales or mechanism to provide redress to whatever consumer issues there are. I also mentioned earlier the no wrong door policy of the Department of Trade and Industry. Yes, we have this, and we welcome all kinds of consumer complaints by sending us an email at consumercare@bdi.gov.ph. But businesses are advised to have their own mechanism before they elevate or accelerate the complaints to the DTI, so that it's going to be easier for the consumer, and it's going to be less burdensome for them, less time consuming for them, if the business is able to address whatever concern the consumer has immediately upon raising it. So just remember, the Department of Trade and Industry is here, and we work with a lot of other government agencies on consumer protection. So we are also building the e-commerce industry in the Philippines. We are also working on the Internet Transactions Act that will cover e-commerce transactions for the protection of the consumer and the merchants as well. So rest assured that government is here, and we are working towards the development of the e-commerce industry and the protection of the consumer.
All right. That's it for today. Thank you so much for making time to share with us your insights, Yusek Castello, Ms. Nava, and Mr. Aquino. And for making this session possible, thank you, Globe. Thanks to our partner organizations, the British Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, Bank Marketing Association of the Philippines, Management Association of the Philippines, the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and our media partner, the Philippine Star. And of course, to everyone who joined us today. Be sure to follow Business World's social media pages to stay updated with our upcoming projects. Again, this is Karen Belmonte, and this has been Business World Insights. Have a great day, everyone.
Sa pagpatak ng ulan, sa pagsubok na dumaraan, may tapang kang harap, lilipad kang may pangarap. Lilipad kang may pangarap.
Kailan ay di mag-iisa, susulong ka ng may kasama, may tapang kang haharap.
Lilipad kang may pangarap. Lilipad kang may pangarap. Simula na ng bukas. Ngayon na, ngayon na. Simula na ng bukas. Ngayon na, ngayon na. Simula na ng bukas. Ngayon na, ngayon na, ngayon na.
Sumpay sa pagbabago,
Harapin ang bagong mundo.